Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk has confirmed that Russian drones were shot down in Polish airspace overnight.
Breaking news out of Poland. The military there accusing Moscow of an act of aggression.
Poland was forced to do the unthinkable. Close multiple airports as unidentified drones swarmed its airspace. NATO fighter jets, Polish, Dutch, Italian, even American, rose into the sky and shot down several of those drones. It was in fact the first direct engagement since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began back in 2022. Meanwhile, to the north, Lithuania literally shut its borders after, in a matter of days, dozens of hot air balloons and drones drifted over from Belarus. These intrusions were not accidents or navigational errors, no, they were calculated provocations by Russia. Let's take a look at why, what happened, and what it means. I'm Jan and this is Prague Pulse. Now, to understand what led to this point, we need to go back in history. See, airspace intrusions are nothing new in Europe. During the Cold War and beyond, Soviet and then Russian aircraft routinely tested NATO reactions. Fighter jets playing cat and mouse over the Baltic Sea or English Channel have been regular headlines for years. But since 2022, these incidents have escalated in number and in intensity. The war in Ukraine opened Pandora's box, and a new pattern of airspace violations began. Suddenly, those routine provocations aren't harmless anymore because we literally have a war around the corner. And in that new reality, one single miscalculation can literally be fatal. I'll give you just a few examples. In March 2022, so shortly after the war began, a huge drone weighing over 6 tons and carrying explosive to make it worse, flew hundreds of kilometers off course. The Soviet-era manufactured machine had launched from somewhere around the war zone in Ukraine and crossed Romania and Hungary, both full NATO members. And the drone went completely undetected by several NATO countries and then crashed in Zagreb, the capital of Croatia, also the capital of a NATO country. It exploded near a Croatian student dorm, and the explosion then damaged dozens of cars, but fortunately didn't injure anyone, but it was a really close call. And since then, the tempo of airspace violations have picked up even more dramatically. A few more examples. In 2024, a Russian Kh-55 cruise missile fired at Ukraine flew again off course, buzzed across Poland's airspace for several minutes, and then crashed deep inside Poland. It was coincidentally just 15 kilometers away from a functioning NATO military base where, among others, US equipment is stationed. The most absurd thing was that it was discovered only months later after it happened when a horseback rider stumbled on the missile's remnants in a forest. Yes, a woman riding a horse just found pieces of a cruise missile, a Russian cruise missile, in a Polish forest. How much Slavic can you get, really? But then came 2025 and matters unfortunately got even worse. It's been a year of unprecedented incursions by Russia. In a single night, at least 19 Russian drones swarmed across the border from Belarus into Poland. Yes, you heard me, 19, and some of them were actually headed to Warsaw. Poland's Prime Minister Tusk called it a major provocation by Russia. It was actually the first time that drones entered Polish territory directly from Belarus. Just to give you an idea of how serious this was, air raid sirens were activated in Poland, and 4 Polish airports, including Warsaw's main shopping airport, were closed. Just imagine going for a holiday and being stranded in an airport because a fighter jet is streaking overhead chasing a drone. Hardly an accident, by the way. In such numbers, definitely not. 19 drones entering Poland. It was definitely coordinated. Polish and NATO forces later managed to shoot down 3 or 4 of the drones mid-air, and one drone, or possibly the missile meant to destroy it, it's not quite clear yet, crashed into a house in the eastern village of Violating. And it blew a hole in the roof just as an elderly couple was watching TV inside that house. It was definitely a miracle that no one was hurt in the process. But the message sent by Russia was received loud and clear. As a result, Poland invoked Article 4 of the NATO treaty, which was only the 8th time in history that such a thing happened. Poland effectively declared its security under direct threat. It's only a step away from Article 5, which is basically declaring that the country is at war because it's been attacked. And the worst part of all this? This isn't a one-off, it's a pattern. In recent weeks, airspace violations have rippled across multiple EU and NATO countries. Just a few days ago, we've seen yet another airport closures in Belgium because, you guessed it, Russian drones appeared at the airport. It's not random chaos. It's a coordinated Russian strategy. Drones and balloons test our weak points, force costly responses because, for example, a fighter jet has to take off, which costs a lot of money, and Russia then measures how much time it actually took us to respond. Every single start of NATO fighter jets or our hesitance to do something and shoot them down tells Moscow something important. Europe's leaders now say it plainly. This is definitely the most dangerous moment in decades for Europe and potentially for the entire NATO. Friedrich Merz said that we're neither at war, but not at peace anymore either. Danish PM, on the other hand, calls this all the most dangerous situation since World War II. And of course, as such, both NATO and the EU need to find a response to the escalating threats before it's too late. And the response has already started at home. Lithuania and 5 other countries have now authorized shoot-downs of enemy drones over their territory. Together with the other 2 Baltic states, they are also developing the so-called Baltic Defense Line, which is a sophisticated network of defenses and surveillance systems designed to delay any possible Russian attack. Because judging by the size of the Baltic countries, of course they couldn't stop a Russian attack indefinitely, but they can at least delay it so that other NATO countries have enough time to get in and help the Baltic states survive. On the more global scale, NATO has started its Operation Eastern Sentry, which aims to strengthen NATO's capabilities in the air, at sea, and on land, with the primary focus being on intercepting Russian drones, unsurprisingly. NATO also wants to standardize procedures and speed up decisions so that when something happens, we are quicker to act. The EU, on the other hand, will want to definitely work closely with NATO so as not to duplicate any efforts, and also develop its own so-called drone wall. The aim of the drone wall is to create a connected, multi-layered system of defenses against drones that will be capable of detecting, tracking, and neutralizing hostile drones, while also enabling precision strikes capabilities through advanced drone platforms and systems. And meanwhile, the European Commission will be acting as the coordinating point for joint procurements and also regularly assessing how prepared individual member states of the EU are or what needs to be improved so that we can defend against a Russian threat better. The EU will of course want to also cooperate with Ukraine and draw on its own extensive first-hand and unfortunately bloody experience with modern warfare because, unsurprisingly, Ukraine now has one of the most developed and sophisticated drone systems in the world because it has been literally using them and perfecting them every single day on the battlefield. While the drone wall is only being born right now, as you would probably expect, there are already tensions, as is often the case in the EU. Frontline states close to Russia, such as the Baltics, welcome this initiative because of course they do. They're really close to Russia and they're existentially dependent on initiatives such as this one. While Germany, France, or Italy have been questioning the initiative's effectiveness and costs. So essentially, the further away you go from Russia, the more pessimistic you are in the EU. But at the very least, the entire EU now agrees that something needs to be done and something needs to be done quickly. The disagreements are mainly on how to finance it and how to split the competences. And that in itself is a big achievement. Which brings us to the only question that matters next. Does any of this actually work? See, coordination is certainly needed and welcome. Plus, the initiatives reassure people on the front line, such as in the Baltics, that Europe isn't asleep and that something is going on. Deterrence isn't only about the actual rearmament itself. It is, by the same token, about the psychological impact. People want to and need to feel safe and taken care of. But, on the other hand, critics also have an important point. We have 2 major issues for this initiative to really work against Russia. First, we don't have enough resources. Quite simply, in June this year, NATO Secretary General Rutte said that the alliance would need to boost its air air defense production by 400% to be able to meet its own war plans. And the demand is now, of course, increasing even more with the war in Ukraine raging literally around the corner. A recent study by a respected think tank has found that almost all European countries in NATO have some sort of inventory issues. In other words, they don't have enough equipment. A second big issue is that we first need to figure out how to effectively and cheaply neutralize drones. See, as it stands now, NATO and the EU currently already have multi-layered air defense systems, which are quite effective, but not for the modern battlefield. Those sophisticated structures have been designed for much larger objects, for example, for shooting down cruise missiles or fighter jets of the enemy. Compare that to the extremely cheap drones that Russia is currently sending our way. Some of them don't cost more than $2,000, whereas a single rocket for our current air defense systems can cost millions. So either we don't have an effective solution to down the drones, or if we do use the rockets we currently have, it is definitely not going to be an economical solution, and we're going to waste our expensive resources that we don't have enough of in the first place. That's also, by the way, why Poland had to decide against shooting down all of the 19 drones that entered its territory in September. It simply didn't have the resources to do so, and so it had to choose 3 or 4 of the drones that were deemed most dangerous, and it shot those down, while the others were basically unrestricted and could fly on within Poland. And that in itself, I don't have to tell you, is definitely dangerous. So we need to come up with effective systems to down drones, be it laser systems, be it simple guns, or I don't know, small rockets. I don't know how to do it, but we need to figure something out, because we simply cannot afford to be using $1,000,000 rockets to down drones that cost $2,000. Doesn't make any sense. But we need to do something. So are we ready to step up? Well, unfortunately not yet, I'm afraid. Putin is already waging a quiet war against us and makes no secret out of it. He's probing with drones, hiding behind deniability, and counting on our delays and on arguments, which will be there, because that's just who we are. We promise speed, but in reality, we move much slower. The drone wall, for example, should be fully online by 2027, which is in a few months, but yet we don't know how to bring certain parts of the drone wall to life. And if we do know what to do, we simply don't have the scale to manufacture as much as we would need to. Stockpiles are thin, and as of now, we don't have an effective solution against Russian provocations. So what should we do? Well, the fix is, I'm afraid, boring, but necessary. We need to increase our production, shorten decision processes, and treat air defense and generally defense against Russia as a 100% duty, not just a headline that looks nice and that we use it as an excuse. No, we really need to take this shit seriously. If we don't, the provocations by Russia will only increase, and with that, escalation becomes much more likely. And let me ask you this, can we really afford that risk? Well, I don't think so. In any case, we'll definitely be watching what happens next, so if you don't want to miss it, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. This has been Jan with Prague Pulse. See you next time. We'll definitely be watching.